kind of sage was Hashirama? It is one of the most pondered questions in all of Naruto, and nobody's ever really answered it, including you, Kishimoto. We're waiting. But there is a couple of popular theories that I happen to know, and I'm going to confer them to you, and you can decide in your heart which is best for you. But you know what's best for my heart? If you go ahead and like this video, subscribe to this page, and hit that noti bell, because I got many more theories and many more explanations. And if you're interested in this one, you'll probably be interested in those ones. There's three major theories about what kind of sage Hashirama is. The first is beaver sage. The second is normal, and I'll explain that in a second. And the third is slug. I kind of believe in 1.5 of these, but let's start with the one that I do not believe in at all. People theorize that because Hashirama is the only person we've ever seen who's been able to use wood release, that he's a beaver sage. Obviously, Yamato is now able to use wood release because he has Hashirama's cell implanted to him, and also Moegi has been shown to be able to use wood release in the data books. But at the time of the making of this theory, it was theorized that he was only able to do it because he had a close connection with people who had, you know, wood relations, like a beaver. And that's the whole reason. With that logic, he could have been a termite sage. He could have been a woodpecker sage. It was a dumb reason. So just as quickly as we brought up this theory, let's move past it, because that one is certainly not it. Now, to explain this second theory, the theory that Hashirama is a normal sage, I kind of have to break down what exactly sage mode is. 1, sage mode is only accessible to people who already have massive amounts of chakra. Jiraiya, Naruto, Hashirama. And the more chakra you have, the more likely you are to become a perfect sage. To quickly touch on what a perfect sage is, that means that when you begin taking in senjutsu chakra, your appearance doesn't change at all, at least physically, in terms of like your jawline doesn't rearrange. Like the lines on Hashirama's face and the dashes in Naruto's eyes don't count as like points away from being a perfect sage user. So let's say you already have this incredible amount of chakra, but you want to learn senjutsu. Well, sage mode is the act of pulling in nature chakra into your body and mixing it with your own chakra. This obviously empowers you because there's nature chakra in everything, so you can vastly increase the amount of chakra in your system. But where do people learn how to do this? From what we've seen, there's 2 locations: Ryuchi Cave and Mount Munabuko. Mount Munabuko is where the toads live, and Ryuchi Cave is where the snakes live. But Hashirama doesn't go either of these places. In fact, we never hear that he goes anywhere to learn sage mode. We simply know he's able to activate it instantaneously, which very few people are able to do. The list kind of starts and ends with Minato and Naruto. So we know he has enough chakra to activate sage mode. We know he didn't go to the snakes or the toads to train. We know he can activate it instantaneously, and we know he has genius level intellect, being able to identify Edo Tensei being used on himself, even though he had never seen it in his life. And this is big. The ability to understand techniques that he doesn't know or see is huge. This is where the theory of normal type sage mode comes in that Hashirama wasn't an animal sage. He taught it to himself. While interacting with nature in the form of wood release, he identified that nature chakra existed in all of the trees that he manipulated and used. This identification of nature chakra led him to pose the question of whether or not he could use that chakra in order to increase his own power. So after years of trying to figure out how to pull senjutsu into his body, he eventually cracked it. And this isn't the most insane thing of all time, because the precedent for sages had been set prior to Hashirama's life. Hagoromo, of which he is technically a descendant of because he is a reincarnation of Ashura, was a perfect toad sage. On top of this, it explains why he shows no exterior differentiation to his appearance when he enters sage mode, because he has no animal influence. On top of this, ironically, Madara actually helps bolster this point. In the Naruto manga, chapter 657, page 8, Madara finally reveals to Hashirama at the end of their reincarnated battle that he has his cells bound to him. Madara having Hashirama's cells, obviously. And he displays to Hashirama as he activates those cells into sage mode that he is able to now enter sage mode and pull in senjutsu chakra. It's at this point he says,
"Only this much power? This will be easy to handle.
As in saying that because the senjutsu power was so within the grasp of his own that he would be able to control it and use it effectively almost immediately, which shows that a talented shinobi is able to learn Sage Mode within mere moments. So the possibility that Hashirama would either luck into it or figure it out and then master it instantaneously is not the craziest thing of all time. So this theory to me, it's got some legs. But the theory I most subscribe to is the last one. Slug Sage Mode. There's too many lines between the Senju and the slugs of Shikatsu Forest for me to ignore it. So let's get into the reasons why I think that he is a slug sage. Hashirama has a natural and incredibly powerful healing factor. A healing factor so powerful he does not have to weave hand signs in order to activate it. If he gets injured, his body just simply begins healing it. In fact, this healing factor is so powerful, the 100 healing seal, the Byakuya seal that we see on Tsunade and Sakura, is based off this healing factor. And since we're talking about the Byakuya seal, it is also the only way to summon Lady Katsuyo. Without the Byakuya seal holding a massive amount of chakra that slowly gets poured in there day after day after day, you could not summon Lady Katsuyo away from Shikatsu Forest. It's because she's so massive and so powerful that you need an almost limitless amount of chakra in order to summon her anywhere. In fact, while using the Byakuya seal, we've only ever seen both Tsunade and Sakura summon at most 70% of her. And I don't think I have to tell you what Lady Katsuyo's whole deal is. She heals people. Simply contacting with Lady Katsuyo without the weaving of hand signs, not that she has hands to weave hand signs with, regardless, will begin healing any injuries you're currently dealing with. A bit like Hashirama. On top of this, the credence that this theory has that the normal Sage Mode doesn't is that Hagoromo himself actually needed help from the Great Toad Sage, the OG that can predict the future, in order to learn Toad Sage Mode. Hagoromo, the guy who gave birth to the two children that Hashirama is, well, I guess he didn't give birth, but the guy who was the father of the two people that started the Indra and Ashura cycle. Now that we're talking, do we ever meet Hagoromo's wife? Regardless, there's also other connections, like the fact that the Senju are called the Senju of the Forest, like Shikatsu Forest. Also, think about this. There's 3 major summons, right? Katsuyo, Oda, Manda, and then Gamabunta. Toads, snakes, slugs. The slugs are from the forest, while the toads are from a mountain and the snakes are from a cave. So if there was one person who was going to be able to use wood release, wouldn't it be someone with a connection to one of the major summonings that's from the forest? And lastly, let's look at the marks that go on Hashirama's face when he activates Sage Mode. If you look at them, and then you look at a picture of Lady Katsuyo, you'll see that the shape in the swoop of the markings are actually relatively similar. So while Hashirama may not get a big toad nose like Jiraiya or literally turn into a snake like Kabuto,
he's a dragon sage.
I know, doesn't mean that he isn't showing slight characteristics of the thing he's possibly channeling. But there is one problem that this theory runs into. If that Hashirama could be a slug sage, why isn't Tsunade? Why isn't Sakura? Shit, for that matter, why isn't Tobirama? Well, one, for the Tobirama point, he was too busy making his own new ninjutsu in order to kill Uchihas more effectively, and he did a good job. But 2, for Sakura and Tsunade, there's actually kind of a sad answer to that. It's like Kishimoto doesn't know how to write women. He knows one type of woman. Strong, punchy healer. Now, if you make strong, punchy healer a perfect sage, strong, punchy healer is about as strong as Naruto, and that's a problem. That being said, though, strong, punchy healer in Boruto right now is stronger than her husband. And if you don't agree, I'm sorry.
You're wrong.
But yeah, what do you think? What kind of sage mode was Hashirama? Was he a beaver sage? He wasn't. Was he a normal sage? Was he a slug sage? Or was he something that I haven't even heard of? Let me know in the comments below. And while you're in the comments, make sure you go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Because if you like listening to me talk about how Hashirama gets his wood, you're gonna love everything I put out. I'm not saying Sakura, if she was a perfect sage, would beat Naruto in a fight. But if she was, she wouldn't have needed to summon him in the pain arc, that's for sure.